Hey everyone, welcome to Unit 3, Editing a Workbook. So in the last few videos we talked about how to open it, how to work through it, how to navigate it, move around, and some of the principles as to navigating quickly, for example using Excel with your keyboard, talking through each of the ribbons, what they do, etc. So you should have a good basic understanding of what Excel can do at this point. Now, the purpose that most people use Excel for, including myself, is spreadsheets, calculating things, creating models. So it's all about, really using formulas, working with numbers, crunching down scenarios and, figuring out what the numbers are and using that for decision purposes. That's what most people use it for in the workplace, but there's, millions and millions of uses. So, in order to do that, it's really important to understand how formulas work, how to edit formulas, how to look at models and edit that. Removing cell content, deleting it, the undo and redo, which we covered a little bit in the previous video, inputting formulas, changing formulas, editing content, etc. So we won't talk about formulas in too much detail because we're going to cover that in the next lesson, including what are the key formulas that you need to know, how they work, etc. But what we're going to talk about in this one, and we'll keep it relatively short, is how do you actually edit the cells to put in a formula and things like that, deleting, copying, etc. So let's get started with our workbook over here. So you probably don't need anything from the ribbon at the top at this point in time. All you need to do is work within the cell that we've got here. So let's choose a formula in here. We've got a spreadsheet over here with a number of different formulas down here. Let's start with average. So we'll cover off what these formulas mean, what they do a little bit later. We just want to talk about how do you edit this data. So we've got numbers in this cell. So the first thing is, in order to edit data, what we want to do is figure out, is it a formula or is it a number? So as you can see, as I select through these cells, you can see my green selector is moving down around row 30 or so. You can see as I move through each of these, I'm also looking at this top formula bar at the top of the page. And this is really what is inside that cell. Depending on whether it's a formula or a value will depend what shows up. So you can see, for example, I'm selecting this one here. It's just showing it with a number 4, which means it's a value. It's not a formula. So this is what I would call kind of input data. So it's just your kind of data set. So if we delete this, what we can do is just press backspace to delete that and type in a new number. So I can type in 6. The other way we can do it is we can select within the formula bar up here and type over the top. And the final way to do it is just to select on the cell and just type a new number in there. So I've typed in a 6, press enter, and now it has been replaced in there. So the other excuse me. Then other scenario that we could come across is when we select the cell and all of a sudden you can see that in the formula bar at the top we've got an equal sign and then these weird way of, kind of looks like mathematical equations. We've got sum, bracket, input data, divide by a count a D31 to J31. So let's break this down. So whenever we see an Excel sign, it means there is a formula following. A formula is basically ways of taking input data and values and converting it into a mathematical formula, which then pumps out an answer. So you might see in this cell we've got a number or an output value, but within that there's a formula, a mathematical equation, which is calculating how to get to that number using the input data. So in this case, what essentially this is saying is, let's sum all of these numbers, divide by count. So count is counting how many there are to calculate an average. So for example, let's sum up all of these and we get to, I selected it by just clicking on my mouse and holding down, but you can also use your keyboard by holding down Control Shift and using your arrow, or just Control Shift and tapping your arrow across. So you can see down the bottom, without even having to type a formula, I can see the 3 most critical ones: the sum, 172, the count is 7, or the average is 28.6. So what this is doing is saying, let's sum up the value of all of these, which is 172, and then dividing it by the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right? But you can see the average is different because this is actually text, not a number. So this formula isn't quite right. That's why it's, it's important to use something like an average formula up here, but we'll cover that in the next video. I just wanted to show you how to edit it. But let's say we wanted to make okay, let's use this one up here. So it's a simpler one. It's an average, right? It's just saying equals average D8 to J8. So it's basically saying select this range from cell D8 to J8 and then take an average of them. But let's say we wanted to only average these numbers over here. What we could do is, there's two ways of editing it. Number one is we can drag this box across like this, and now you can see the numbers have updated and it's only selecting this range. So that's an easy way of doing it. It's a visual way of doing it. Now the number's updated. The other way we can do it, and I'm just going to press Ctrl Z to redo that, is we can just actually edit the numbers in the cell. So instead of saying D8, which is this cell here, to J8, the dots, so this colon is basically giving us a range. What we can do is we can actually change this letter here. So D is the column, so we can move this column across here to column F. So we can delete that and press F. Now the 8 is the row, so that hasn't changed. It's still in row 8. So F8 is this num here, and J8 is this one here, and the dots mean everything in between. So I've just edited it by deleting it, and then we can press enter and it should update. And now you can see this has this has updated the formula as well. So that's basically how you edit cells. Let's try and look at one where maybe we want to change the formula. So let's try it again. So again, a couple of options, select that. We can just type over the top. So we can go equals sum, which is a very basic formula which adds all the cells, and select it that way. Or if I redo, we can go just delete this and go sum that range, and the formula will change and the output has changed as well. Okay, so and if we want to delete data, I think we've covered that already. You can just select the range, press delete, it's all gone. Now let's cover undoing and redoing again. So, we kind of covered this a little bit in the last video, but it's something that you'll come across all the time. It's up here by default, so you can press this one here one time to redo the last step, or you can select from this drop down and go back several actions. So for example, if we wanted to undo us typing in this formula in K8 and this formula in K31, we can select both and it's going to undo both of them at the same time. We can also redo it and put it back to how it was by selecting, we can do one step to redo by pressing that, or we can do multiple steps and redo two actions at the same time. Now, I don't typically click the button to do this. What I do is I use my keyboard. I use Ctrl Z. Remember this shortcut, you're going to be using it all the time. Let's press Ctrl Z. It's going to redo the last step one time, but you can tap it multiple times and redo multiple steps very quickly. So that's often a good way of doing it. And as you can see, it's changing all of those things until it makes that noise, which means that there's no more steps to redo. So you can also do redo with your keyboard. It's basically, as you can see, if I hover up here, it's Control Y. But most people use undo a lot more than they do redo, because it's common to make a mistake and then just have to do it again. Okay, I think we've pretty much covered all the key things we wanted to cover in this video. As I mentioned, we're going to keep it relatively short in this video. The only thing that I can maybe think that we can cover in here that we haven't covered already is around the longer cell contents. So this one over here, let me just undo that. So all of these have been quite short. So I just wanted to show you what it looks like when the cell formula is quite long. So let's just quickly find a long formula in here. But let's also undo our changes that we made here. Maybe we can find a long formula in here somewhere. So basically what will happen is it's going to overwrite the text in the next cell. It's the same principle as if we're editing a shorter formula. We can just edit it up here or just overwrite in the cell. I don't have a good example here to show you, but it's the same principle as what we've already been through. So I think that's all we'll cover in this video. Relatively short one because it's simple, but we'll move on to a more interesting one in the next video, which is covering Excel formulas and what are the key ones that you need to know. So thanks for watching. See you in the next video.